Hola! Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer. I am here. I'm still saying Spanish words just because of the fact that I was just in the Dominican Republic with Valer Shabilla watching Nashville SC beat Mocha. This is the Nashville SC podcast, by the way. If you did not know, I'm also here with Clay Trainum. Gentlemen, what's up? How's your weekends?
Who are you, though?
Oh, I'm Stephen Robinson. Sorry, I forgot to
There we
mention
go.
that. Thank you very
There we
much
go.
for. Thank you very much
And is
for.
the pharmacy open? I feel like the pharmacy might be open.
How do you say that in Spanish?
La
Not
farmacia está abre.
I gotta
poquito
say,
español.
it,
My favorite phrase.
Oh, it's so good. Favorite part of like Blair and I are going to talk about our trip into the DR, by the way, but just the segue from that, one of my favorite parts of the trip was if anybody spoke to me in Spanish, which there's no English speaking, I would turn to Valer. He would get mad at me every single time I would turn to him and then be able to talk about what they said, what the person said. It was fantastic. Or he would be able to communicate for me. It was 10 out of
It,
10. I loved it.
it was hilarious because like I clearly don't speak Spanish or just don't speak it enough. Or no, I'm just gonna commit. I don't speak Spanish. I don't. But I know how to communicate to people who don't know the language I'm speaking because I've done that a few times in my life, as you can imagine. And I think that's what saved me really in this whole trip. But the waitress would come in and ask Steven a question. Neither of us understood, but Steven would look at me like I'm supposed to know this. And I'm like, this is not my country, bro. They don't speak my language. I don't know what to tell you.
It is
But
true. I
yeah,
was expecting to get a personal pizza, and Valer was kind of that, and I did not get a personal pizza, but that's okay. Clay, how
the
was your
one
You
time he
should have
ordered
just said la
alone.
pizza
No,
because that's pizza in Spanish is la pizza.
no. The one time Steven ordered alone, we ordered together most times. The one time Steven ordered alone, instead of getting a personal pizza, he had the biggest family size. I'm talking about like extra large pizza delivered to him, and
and
it was
the
hilarious.
crust of the pizza had like mozzarella stick balls on it that you could they were like you could rip
Yes.
off of them. I was not expecting just another thing added. It was delicious though, I'm not gonna lie. Clay, before we talk a little bit more about the Dominican, how was your weekend? What's going on with you, buddy? We missed you.
My weekend was well, I wish that I would have been in the Dominican Republic, but I'm going to England next month and I can't afford that two international trips. But that didn't really happen at the weekend. But at the weekend, very big weekend for Middle Tennessee State University athletics, and I got to work both ends of a basketball doubleheader with Western Kentucky, the 100 miles of hate, and Middle won both of them. So it was pretty good on that front. And then Everton didn't lose, but they got a draw and then 4 points back today. So having a good day on that front. So that was my weekend.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm just gonna stick with my vibes from the DR because look, it was I think Valera can also agree that it was an amazing trip on all ends. I'll say from the match side of things, it was fun. It was probably the closest I'll ever be allowed to a press conference, so that was a good time to be to be at NC. So thank you, NSC, for letting me be a part of that conference that I didn't necessarily get to be a part of. But yeah, other than that, like the match, it was like watching an MPSL match. It's watching like an MLS team. The stadium was like it reminded me of the Vanderbilt soccer stadium, just like a little bit. Like there was 1,500 people there, maybe. Um, you know, it was an amazing experience. Blair texted me, I think, what, in the 55th minute, just saying, dude, I'm so glad that we did this. Blair in his press box area, his press box, that he wouldn't come down and be with the regular folk. He had to be in his caution tape.
it it wasn't the press box that was prohibiting me. It was the folks that were there who were having a great time and enjoying their game. I wouldn't have been able to focus on writing those amazing tweets that people want from me if I were there because I would have been having so much fun with you, Steven. And I just professionally I couldn't just do that, you know.
That's
It's my
fair.
duty.
Speaking of, yeah, Tunji, I'm sorry you were never allowed to have a Vuvu Slayla again. Shout out Tunji, I love you, but no. No, I mean, look, we got to see Nashville get the win, of course, in Mocha. Definitely was you got the quality of what Mocha FC actually is when it comes to quality of soccer, which was not very heavy. Um, but it was weird because like as we were talking about it, there wasn't a ton of soccer buzz in the city specifically. Nobody kind of knew like why me and Valaire were there. But then as we started going through the week, as we were in the stadium, we got a little bit more interaction with people. In the stadium was fantastic when it came to having conversations. I had trouble getting my ticket, and people were just ready to help me. 1000% ready to help me when it came to coming to like for that experience.
I,
Um, but
I'm planning to hopefully like do more content from our trip, Stephen, and have that out. But what I would say is that just in terms of the DR, the Dominican Republic, I was very impressed with how everything worked out, and the people there are super nice. And I just have to say this, like, I think if this was another CONCACAF nation, the Mexicos of the world, or Costa Rica or Panama, these are soccer nations. These are, they've been around the soccer game for over 100 years now, and I think there would have been a little bit more, animosity in a way, I guess, or just you're going for away an away day essentially at their place. However, in the Dominican Republic, I think the excitement for soccer as a sport is kind of similar to where I would put it here in America, maybe in the 90s or so, where people are there not necessarily to support Mocha FC, but to support soccer. And that's something actually I saw somebody at the airport in Miami when I was coming back, and forgive me, I didn't get his name, but he recognized me. And we kind of talked for a minute about it, and that's exactly what he said. He was telling me that it looked like everybody there was there to kind of just support this big occasion, big event that's happening in their city. People seemed excited that there was a team from the United States coming in, a team from MLS, even though the budgets are completely different. At the end of the game, at the end of the day, it was soccer that kind of brought everybody together. And I think it reflected really well on the DR and Mocha FC as well.
It's a good reminder that while MLS's quality, when you compared to big leagues in Europe, is a big step off, on this continent, in this part of the world, MLS is one of the big leagues. It's you got Liga MX, you have MLS, and you have a few teams in Costa Rica. Those are kind of the big hitters. And so MLS going down to what is essentially a baseball country. I mean, Valera went to both Estadio Cibaos. One of them is much nicer than the other. And so you can tell that there's
that was an extremely confusing part of the
Shout
trip,
out to
by the way.
Steven. I will
but
say, without Steven, I wouldn't have been able to navigate that part.
but either way, like it's a good reminder that when Nashville, who in America and MLS, we don't think of them as like this major market team that everyone knows. But when Nashville goes down to the Dominican Republic, that's as good a team as they'll probably get for years and years and years because of the stature of the sport in the Caribbean. And so it's kind of a good reminder. It's like, oh wait, like they're probably really excited to see Hani Mukhtar and MLS MVP playing on this
Mhm.
plastic pitch, with a tree at one end. Like this is, I still can't help but think what it would have been. Obviously we want Nashville to go through, and we hope they will. But like the idea of Messi playing down there is so crazy to me,
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah,
that's the
no,
type
I
of thing
thought
that can
like the
happen in
thought
these
of that for
tournaments.
me too was just like imagine if Nashville would have lost and Messi would have been at that stadium would have been crazy. There would be no way that they would be even able. The amount of Miami jerseys that I saw there was ridiculous, just based on the fact that oh we might play Messi. It was hilarious. Uh,
Well, it's like when you watch an NFL game in England, right? It's you have the jerseys from both teams that are there, but you're going to see all, 32 jerseys from the NFL at an NFL game in England because it's the one time that they get to watch it.
Right. Just I think I have one little small disappointing thing, and it could have just been like they needed to get on the bus right away. Joe Willis was the only player that kind of came up to the fans that did travel, which we did have 10 to 15 fans that did travel. They could have been trying to get on the bus right away, and realize that we're not in MPSL and USL anymore, so that doesn't happen all the time. But it would have been really cool to get a little bit more of a reception from the team in that regard. But I think that some of that's probably something that I need to get over at some point, as we are now in MLS and we are not the same team and league that we used to be. But there is one thing that made me happier, probably the best compliment that I've received in the 5 years, and I'll just read it before we move on. This is a Reddit post from a Red Bulls fan, so this is a good segue to talk about where the vibes are at. At some point, Don Garber has to realize that the people he needs to keep are these freaks who flew from Nashville to the Dominican Republic in like the fourth year of the club's MLS existence to watch an obvious W Champions League game and are extremely audible on the broadcast right now, and not the people who showed up for Messi. How do I get them to stay for life and bring a friend next time should consume his every waking moment? That has been the best compliment I've ever received in my entire existence of doing this, and I thank you for that.
What's the username?
Sorry, let me hypermalization.
There we
Well, I
go.
mean,
Shout out.
that's what we've talked about on here before. It's like, we don't want to feel like we give off the vibe that we don't welcome new fans of Nashville, but I mean, it takes the diehards to build a culture. It takes the diehards to build something up. And those people in the Dominican Republic that were going to this game, a lot of them probably weren't Mocha fans. They were
Yeah.
soccer fans, like Blair was saying, and it takes those people to build up a soccer culture in a country. And so, like, it's great to have the big stars that bring, casual fans and whatnot in, because some of those casual fans will become diehards. But yeah, he's absolutely right. If you want the league to be flourishing and thriving, you need to have people that are willing to travel to go to games, which I believe I've been saying on this podcast since we started it in 2019. So, yeah, he's absolutely right.
But with that, we did have the win, of course, in Mocha, and then the draw, which all three of us predicted, by the way. Some of us had different score lines than others. So shout out to us for getting the draw prediction. Um, is that do you take that right now? Like, do you think that's kind of expected, or do you think we should have gotten more?
I mean, if I would have taken a win and a draw this week in either fashion. I would have taken either one. I think it worked out the way that's most logical, which is you beat the team that's lesser than and you draw with the team. Potentially, the funny thing is, as I said on the show, there might be some turnover on the roster, but I assumed it would just be because of the midweek, not because everyone got hurt.
Right.
But either way, that's what we saw. And after that lineup came yesterday, if you would have told me we'd get a clean sheet and a draw, I would have like bitten your arm off for it to make that happen.
I completely agree. Yeah, don't need to keep going on that one, but yeah,
I,
100%
I
agree with Clay.
I think the vibe is very interesting from a national fan's perspective, though. I think it's very easy to use, the championship, like the Champions League Cup, like the Championship Cup, like being a part of that. Like most teams that are a part of that competition don't do good in the early seasons. I think that's something to talk about. Obviously, with
Not a
the
single win.
huh?
There's not a single win from a Champions Cup participant this week.
Agreed. And like I think, having players injured and stuff like that, it also makes it a big deal. I do think it's a little bit different for teams like LAFC, like Seattle that don't necessarily they didn't have the struggles that we did at the latter part of the year. I think most of the fans remember the latter part of the year as a Nashville fan. And this, as their first MLS match, is like, oh, great, here we go again. So I think that's probably where like the vibe checks to me are a little bit different for most like the Nashville SC fan base compared to looking at it from this perspective.
I'm going to give credit to the NSC fan base a little bit, especially the online portion, which sometimes can get really hard on NSC. I think a lot of people have been very forgiving after a performance against Red Bull that was not great, because I think this speaks to the level of like saying soccer IQ sounds like really patronizing, and I don't really mean it to be that way, but like I think that speaks to a level of understanding how the world works and how the game works. A lot of people are understanding, well, short week, guys out. This is what's going to happen. And so I will say that it hasn't been nearly as negative as I expected it to be leaving the stadium last night. And so I think a lot of people kind of understand where things are and where they're going. They have concerns that are fair, but I think most people feel kind of all right going into this week.
And I'll just jump in here and go into our next segment, which I said I'm going to do every week, and then I never did again. So I'm bringing it back. Monday poll. So I asked on Monday poll today if the compared to when it first opened, how was the atmosphere at Geodis Park, especially yesterday. We've already gotten 100 votes in a couple of hours on this. If you want to vote on this, it's on Twitter. 53% says the same, 22% is better, and 25% worse. So again, it seems like the same is more so the vibe. I feel like if the injuries weren't there and Nashville still drew 0-0, things would have been a little different. So that just goes to what Clay was saying. And then the other part I would like to say is that I think there is an increase. We've always talked about this increase in knowledge about the game and increase in sort of these little moments that fans can have an impact on the match. For example, yesterday Forsberg was amazing to start with, Emil Forsberg for the Red Bulls, but at one point he took a free kick and it was just like, as the English say, rosette, it was way far out. And you heard the ironic cheers, like you heard it pretty loudly that NSC fans were cheering. And I was very proud of that because honestly, like it's something that, maybe I did when I was in the stands or Clay would do or Steven would do, but like it's not the common soccer going fan thing to do, right? It's very English to start with, but also it's everywhere, right? So like seeing that, and it's these little moments. And last season I talked about when the ball was switched from one side to the other, everybody gave a little clap. That's improvement. That's people knowing the game and understanding it. So I think it's kind of just a testament to the growing game.
Yeah, that was the loudest you missed the whole damn goal that I think I've ever heard in the stadium so far. So it made me happy as well, just
I
from the couch.
I will say on that poll, I it did remind me of the way it was probably the same as the first game at Geodis, but there's a middle chunk in between the game last night and the first game where Geodis was immaculate. Like during that Leagues Cup run, it was a different level. And I feel like we saw a little taste of that last 10 minutes. That last 10 minutes when everyone realized that Nashville didn't deserve anything in this game and might have a chance to get something out of this game. That's when it really turned up another notch. And if they can repeat that and make that last a whole game, results will come at home. They will come at home. This team is too good to not pick up results at home.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about just kind of the match itself. We'll start with the Red Bulls match in the second segment. Just talk more about that in depth. I'm sure all three of us have some thoughts on it. And then the third segment, we'll talk about Mocha and then the schedule ahead, and we'll do that next, right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at Pharma Soccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And you also can check us out on our Patreon. If you did not know, our Patreon is $5 a month. That helps keep the lights on for the show. We really appreciate all of the work that you put in, all the Patreons that we do have currently. Always looking for more people to join as patients. It really does help support the show. Gives us the ability to do a lot of cool things. Blair has some really cool stuff coming down the line as well. And Patreon helps. What?
Plug my stuff. That's a good idea.
Oh
Have you
yeah.
guys watched On Air with Valer? Have you heard about it?
What's on air with Valair? Did you release something?
Yeah, it's a new show I'm doing. It's like I'm interviewing Nashville SC players and getting to know them better on and off the pitch. It's a really cool idea. Nobody has ever thought of it before.
It's
But
great.
I've already have an episode out there with Jack Mayer. So you can go youtube.com and you can either type On Air with Valer or type the words Valer or type the word Jack Mayer. I don't know, actually, maybe that one won't pop up, but you can find all the links on my Twitter and all that. So make sure to follow along. I'm working to schedule a couple more of those in the upcoming future. So there will be another one next month and maybe more than that as well. So keep an eye out. On Air with Valer. Thank you for that opportunity.
Absolutely, Valair. Anytime to plug Jack Mayer. But speaking of Jack Mayer, he's probably going to not want to talk about the Red Bulls match itself, like we are going to talk about. I'm sure there's going to be A lot of conversation. I'm sure this is probably the most we'll be able to discuss about a Nashville 0-0 draw that we've ever been able to put into one segment. So if you did not know or have been living under a rock, Nashville did draw New York Red Bulls at home 0-0. Uh, Definitely a weird matchup with Nashville not having any of their DPs in the starting lineup. Hani Mukhtar and Sam Surridge both were out of the lineup completely, with Walker Zimmerman coming in 65th minute, whatever, 70th, whenever that happened. Also missing Godoy, who came in later on in the match as well. Lovett still being out. And of course, Randall Leal, who we've had multiple discussions about. Um, Look, the first half was a just I don't know. It was an understanding that this was not supposed to be the team that was in this match. I think we can all agree with that, correct? And the first half definitely represented that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it is. It was a hard match to win over the neutrals for either Nashville or the New York Red Bulls. The New York Red Bulls are traditionally hard to play, anyways. There's a reason why Nashville's never beat them, including in USL when with Red Bulls too. Uh, I was very worried when I saw the lineup because it just felt like the type of game where New York gets a couple goals and Nashville just doesn't put anything together, which is a game that Nashville has had with the full complement of its players with New York several times. And so that first half was pretty dreadful. I think I even put dreadful in the rundown to describe it. But I do want to point out like the thing that I really liked was that they I think we talk about character with Nashville a lot. It's something that Mike Jacobs and Gary Smith have harped on their entire time in Nashville, treating the locker room as if it's its own player, all this stuff. And I think it shows a lot of character to be able to throw out, guys that not starters, not expecting to be starters, and to be able to put in a shift. And whenever they're just being run down the entire first half to keep plugging away and ultimately get the result, I think speaks to a lot, especially at this point in the season when you're trying to build something, you're trying to build cohesiveness, you're trying to build team unity with some new players in there, you're trying to go through a continental competition at the same time. Like, I think there's a lot to be gained out of this that doesn't show up in the table.
Yeah, I think it's it's one of those things where if Red Bulls could finish better, we're probably all looking at this game as a completely different in a completely different way. Hitting the post three times during the match is not how Nashville. It's not as many chances Nashville concedes generally. Gary Smith talked a little bit after the match about about the two center backs, Jack Mayer and Lucas McNaughton, probably not having their best half out there. They were beaten a couple of times by those long balls, and I think there was a little bit of rustiness, but more so, there was just more of I don't want to call it like lack of leadership or anything like that, but there was just a lack of sort of asserting your dominance and maybe having somebody there to say, "Hey, pick up your head. We're good. We're playing at home. It's fine. Let's go." And that's eventually what Walker Zimmerman provided, I think, the end. But when you are missing five first team players who generally would start this match, that happens. I mean, that's half of the damn team. So like I'm not, and this is not a dig on Sean Davis or Drew Yearwood, but neither of them or Alex Muyl, but all three of those players are not those type of players, and they haven't been in Nashville long enough. Well, Alex Muyl was, but he was further higher up the pitch than the other two I mentioned. So I think it's one of those things where if you can imagine that match with Walker Zimmerman starting, Hani Mukhtar starting, and Sam Surridge starting, I don't think Red Bulls would have had as many chances, and I don't think Nashville would have looked as dreadful.
Um, we've gone probably as long as you can be allowed to go talking about this game without talking about Joe Willis. I think towards the end of last season, especially after the Leagues Cup, there became not necessarily a popular sentiment, but a sentiment that it was time to move on from Joe towards maybe giving Panico a shot. Um, because Panico had some good moments in that run. I think this was a really good reminder of how good Joe Willis is. And look, we've been guilty of that on this show before. Like both Valaire and I were trying to get Joe Willis sent out for Sean Johnson not that long ago, but a really good reminder that might have been the best half of Willis's career in terms of like shots that should have gone in for goals that he stopped. Um, it was a really impressive reminder that Joe Willis is one of the best in the league, and he's statistically been one of the best in the league for his entire time in Nashville.
Not only did he win the fan vote for man of the match, he also was the man of the match for Gary Smith, which made a point to say those words that Joe Willis was his man of the match.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things from a goalkeeping perspective. I know we've had like kind of questions about it, but I think from like a Nashville, like besides maybe the defense, like Joe Willis has been an absolute staple in this team, and his success has a lot to do with how this team can be like handle. And I think I even think some of the saves that he did make, sorry, like really did start to kind of get the team a little bit more, hey, let's get going. Let's kind of do something. So the second half turned out to be a little bit better.
Um, I realized that we forgot to put this on the run. I want to talk about the red card in a second, but I don't want to move on from talking about the guys that were in this lineup without specifically mentioning Taylor Washington, who was put into a pretty tough situation as someone who's never really been a consistent starter in MLS. And he had a couple of mishit crosses. That's what you'll expect, generally speaking, but he made some very big time plays. It's weird to think of him as like the senior figure in the squad, but that's very much what he is now. And that was a veteran's, performance from Taylor Washington on Sunday. And I mean, there was one particular stop that he definitely kept the New York Red Bulls off the board, but like what a performance from a guy that's not really supposed to be playing all that much, especially starters minutes. And he started 2 games last week. I just think it's a really that going back to that character thing that like that exemplifies that because we've thought he might not make the squad, a couple years, and here he is starting the opener and putting in a really workmanlike, performance.
I think it was like one of the things that I saw, and you could tell it was the work that he put in. So it was the cross, it was for the free kick from the cross that he put in that he then had that play that was absolutely phenomenal when it came to stopping Emil Forsberg from that one-on-one situation where he turns before the free kick and he's just like, wait, I'm taking this free kick? Like me? Like yeah, Taylor, you put in the work. You deserve like all the work that you've put in, to get to that point where you can even start taking. I mean, he took a decent amount of corners that match too. Like it does. You are correct. Clay absolutely shows that character and drive from this team.
The best Taylor Washington highlight in that game is when Walker Zimmerman missed his high five coming onto the field, and Taylor high fived himself. I very much enjoyed it because it was a
I
very
missed that.
characteristic
I missed that
facial. And
too.
Walker comes in, Taylor has his hand out, and then Walker just runs by, and he goes.
I need a video.
I
I'll
I need
have
a
to look
video.
at this
little
when
fist
Walker
bump.
comes in. This is great.
Speaking of Walker, someone, I think maybe Nick Fraser asked Walker after the match what he thought of Taylor Washington and his performance. And Walker said that the Mocha match was probably Taylor's best match in a Nashville shirt. Obviously, Walker haven't seen the USL highlights. But, from an MLS perspective, I do agree. I think he played a really good match against Mocha and then came in and played another 90 minutes. I think he's going to play probably another 90 minutes or close to it against Mocha again on Wednesday because Dan Lovitz is just now coming back. And, he warmed up a little bit yesterday, but he never got on the pitch. So I think Lovitz will get maybe 10, 20 minutes against Mocha on Wednesday. But chances are we're going to see another Washington start.
And by the way, in that Mocha match, Taylor became the first Nashville player to play in 7 different competitions, official competitions for Nashville SC, which is a pretty cool little thing to star and put next to his record here in Nashville. But what'd you guys think of that red card?
Okay. Sorry, Steven. You got ready. Go ahead.
No,
What
you
you
can
have?
go. I'm curious on how it was reversed. I like that is the
Okay.
one thing I'm curious about.
So to me, I didn't see it in person, right? So I think that's the part I missed. I didn't see it happen in real life, so I wasn't able to kind of tell. So when I saw a red card shown, I kind of just like looked around me, like, where can I see a replay as soon as possible? And and as soon as I saw the replay, I was like, okay, I don't think this is a red card. Now, have they been given before? Yes, but I think while this was a dangerous play, I do think it's a soccer play as well. Like he was going for the ball. And then the other thing that to me makes it less of a red card, first is the intention, of course, but I know intention is not always kind of considered in these situations. The second thing is that he pulled his kick. Sean Davis pulls his kick a little bit once he knows it's going towards that area. The third thing is there wasn't a whole lot of contact. And I think that comes into play. I think a yellow card is the right play because again, intentions is not part of this. I think a yellow card is fair. And I don't think the Red Bulls can be like really upset that this wasn't kept as a red.
I I was very surprised to see the red get taken away. What I said in the stands was immediately after I saw it, I was like, that's harsh, but I get it. Like I've seen that red
Mm-hmm.
given, a dozen times in my
Yeah,
life.
that it's
And
I said something like right when I saw it, I'm like, well, yeah, you can't put your boot that high, Sean. Like it wasn't necessarily the contact or anything, but you
it was
can't put
like
the
it was like I've seen that not given as many times as I have seen it given.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw it was given, I wasn't even sure they were going to go to VAR because he waited around on the field for a while, took the captain's armband off, and I was like, all right, they're playing a man down. But like I was kind of surprised when it went to VAR. But once it went to VAR, I was pretty certain it was going to be taken off. It was one of those where it's like, if you look at it a few times, you can get yourself to a yellow. But when I saw it live, I was like, seen it given seems harsh in the first game of the season. Like that's kind of where I was.
I will say, like, the referee, I think, especially in that situation, handled it perfectly. Like, on the pitch, it seemed like everybody knew what was going on. Hey, we're looking at this. Sean Davis was losing his mind a little bit, understandably, because I think you don't want to get a red card in the home opener. Um, and I think he handled it perfectly. He went and looked and was able to alter his decision, which referees are very much not likely to do in soccer. It's very rare that they do that. So I was pretty impressed with that part because as a replacement referee, I really didn't know what we were gonna get.
What I told a friend of the show, Aaron, and the guy who sits next to me, other than my wife, of course, at games was like, I was like, I'm going to give the referee a little bit of credit because he didn't stop and wait and think about it. He saw the foul, he made the decision. He didn't let it replay in his mind for 5 minutes before he decided on it. He made the decision, and VAR turned it over. And how many times do we see refs kind of him and Hall before they make the decision? There have been a lot of refereeing controversies over the weekend with the replacement refs, and there are some in this Nashville game. But at the end of the day, like this was not the worst potential performance. There were definitely worse performances on Sunday from replacement referees. That being said, like when they're doing the ref you suck chants at the game, I was like, why don't you just do like a pay the refs chant? Because it's not going to get any better until you actually pay these guys what they should be paid. So
Yeah, and I think the
the
ref
red card was interesting.
and the ref, the ref that was at our game was the ref that had the Wednesday Real Salt Lake and Miami match. So at least he was able to get one match under his belt before coming to Nashville, which I do think helped us um, for sure. But that red card was a little bit later, in the first half, kind of started to lead us to the second half, where we started to get a little bit more of an adjustment. I think Gary Smith saw something that I kind of saw at the beginning of the game, which has been an absolute problem for a decent amount of time, is how do we transition the ball from the midfield to the forwards itself? And I think it was very good to shift Schaffelberg more up to a striker role, bring Tyler Boyd back a little bit more into the midfield, which led to a little bit more attack and a little bit more aggression from the Nashville side. But I think one thing that we can agree on from that standpoint, Tyler Boyd is absolutely going to be, in my opinion, worth way more than we got him for.
Yeah, I think Tyler Boyd between the Mocha match and this match is a absolute baller. I mean, just such a good presence on the field. He is way more of a Leal than he is a Pico. I think Ben Wright and I were talking about this a little bit yesterday as well. Like his technique on the ball is incredible, pretty much like unmatched. I think by Nashville SC, maybe Mukhtar. honestly, I'd put him kind of on the same level in terms of ball control. He has the speed, he's fast, but he's not like, he's not Schaffelberg fast. And I think that's what differentiates him because he doesn't have that speed, he goes through people rather than just burn them on the run. And I think that allows him to kind of be that extra sort of midfielder when needed, but also play on the forward line. I do want to talk about the change in position in formation real quick. I think what that provided is just instead of Nashville being so wide, they kind of became more narrow. And I think that's eventually what led to having more possession and doing something with that possession, because your two center backs on either side of Walker, they ended up pressing a little bit higher, and with that they were receiving the ball a little bit higher and making those battles a little bit higher, which allowed Nashville to push more forward. That's first. And then the second thing is that the midfield area for Nashville got a lot more congested, which is a good thing because Teal was pretty much isolated by himself for most of the first half. And then when you bring more players close to him, there's more interplay, there's more link up play. And then that didn't limit the runs from the right and left side by the wideouts, but what it did is that allowed for those runs more so because they're pulling the Red Bull players a little closer to the middle. So I think it really worked out for that match. I don't know if we're going to see it again. Gary Smith said they never practiced this in preseason, so this was the first time they ever played like this. And he said he had some instructions for the players who went in, but I think they executed what Gary wanted really well, and almost got something out of that match.
Yeah, it was extremely close for sure. I before we talk about the next person, I think in the lineup that we're going to talk about, I also do want to. I'm excited to see 90 minutes of Mackenzie Gaines, which I believe we're probably going to get on Wednesday. I think there were a few times that he absolutely had that flash. Honest, it's just again, it's that end product. Can that end product come together for him? For sure. Yeah, I think he might be quicker than Taylor.
Well, what I was really impressed with was Gaines was, and I this was something I was talking about watching the game too, is like Schaffelberg relies on his speed, his pace to get to a lot of places, and maybe necessarily isn't always in the exact right place that he needs to be to make a play. And I feel like we saw Gaines kind of more naturally in places to be dangerous, albeit very small sample size. But when Gaines came in, he was immediately in the right place several times to turn it into a potential attack or a potential move going forward. And that's something that's really exciting to me because having those options, like we don't know what's going to happen with Leal, whatever. Is Schaffelberg going to be a full-time starter? We'll find out. I think he probably is. Uh, but having an option like Gaines, who could go out there, who could be in that, who might have some sort of natural instincts on where to be playing, that like that's the part that's really, really interesting to me because you're throwing a lot of pace out there. If they can get some goals from Gaines, some goals from Schaffelberg, if he can kind of get off the schneid that he was on at the end of last season, it becomes the ceiling on the team just goes that much higher.
Yeah, and I mean Gary was very happy with him and said so in the match. And I think the other part he said, which is very controversial, he said he thinks, or yeah, maybe he's even faster than Jacob Schaffelberg, which is pretty strong because Jacob Schaffelberg is very fast. If you couldn't tell, so I'm interested to see where this goes with Gaines. But I think what we can agree on here, and I think this is kind of leading into the next point we have, is that Nashville SC depth wise is in a much better place right now than they were last season and maybe even the season before. What you're looking at is missing 5 first team players in the first half. Is just I think just still being able to kind of stay with the Red Bulls, not concede a goal. Now, be it they were kind of lucky with that, but being able to continue to field this team and having options off the bench, even with missing all those players, is a testament to the depth that they currently have. So I think Mackenzie Gaines, you'll see a lot more of him than somebody like, let's say, Luke Hawkinson, who he effectively kind of replaced on the squad.
Well, I mean, some of that depth did come under a little controversy from the National SC fan base, though. One player I do want to touch on real quick would be Teal Bunbury. Obviously, a performance for most people left to be desired from Teal. I, Me personally, he's your second striker. He was put in a position where he's your second striker. I don't think he's supposed to be starting matches and playing 90 minutes all the time. That's I think you expect Teal to be hold up play ready, be a presence on corners and be able to provide some link up play. I think the first half was rough. I think the second half helped a little bit more. I think one example that Tyler Boyd to that really nice cross from Tyler Boyd, I think Sam Surge is there. Teal Bunbury just unfortunately doesn't have the pace. I don't think that's necessarily a testament to Teal Bunbury being a bad striker. I just think that's kind of going a little bit further. I don't know if you guys have anything else to talk about when it comes to Teal, but that's my thought.
Well, I mean, it was kind of echoed by Valera's compatriot Jeff Remlinger, but like the one thing that Teal did that I don't think got a lot of mention is that he was winning duels. He was winning the ball. Only one player won more aerial duels in MLS this past week, and that was Christian Benteke. And second on that list had 4 or 5 fewer. So, or third on that list had 4 or 5 fewer. And the only problem was he won the ball, and then they didn't do anything with it. And I think that that's where the frustration comes in. But end of the day, if Nashville's going to be successful, Teal Bunbury has to be part of that equation, whether that's being moved on from or that's being a backup striker. And so it seems weird to put a lot of focus on him as a person, which I find kind of uncomfortable because he's not the person who put him in that role. And that's what kind of annoys me about some of the chatter post game, because he worked his socks off in that game. He worked hard the whole game. It just did not come off the way that anyone would have liked.
Yeah, I think it's a lot different than being like, I don't see Jonder moving at all. What the heck is happening? You see Teal working on the pitch for 90 minutes, whether it's in a productive way or like, I don't think you can hate on him as a person. He works for this club. And he worked for the club a little bit on Wednesday as well. Against the Mocha match. We'll talk a little bit more about that match as well as the upcoming week right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at Pharma Soccer, again at our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And like I talked about in the second segment, you can also check us out on Patreon. Helps keep the lights on in the background for us in the show. We really appreciate all of our Patreon members that are there. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Look, we know we had the MLS match against Red Bulls on Saturday, but as Valera and I were there in the Dominican Republic, we had our first preview match of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, where Nashville did get the 3-0 win. We did want to talk about that Red Bulls match first. It was more fresh in our minds, and I think a little bit more particular to the squad itself. But that match, we did get a look at what our first team would look like if we had a lot more of those pieces, if we had the Hanis, if we had the Sams linking up together, and it was sexy to see, let me tell you.
It was very nice. It was as soon as I saw that lineup, I was really glad that Nashville SC and Gary Smith were serious about this competition. And I've said it multiple times. Nashville getting Mocha is a favorable result, and then having Miami following that is a really good opportunity because Miami still have yet to beat Nashville in 90 minutes with Messi. So you don't even have to beat Miami. You technically need 2 draws and you can advance. All that aside, I'm not going to get ahead of myself there, but I just think this competition provides an opportunity for Nashville that will put them on the map, that will do things that MLS just simply cannot do, or Leagues Cup for the matter, because that's a made-up competition, unlike the Champions Cup, which is not a made-up competition. Just want to be clear about that. But getting into more about on the pitch stuff, I mean, Nashville SC executed exactly what they wanted to execute. With Mocha being at the quality they were, that keep that in mind. But Nashville still has to go in there and take care of business. That's the thing. When teams win when they're supposed to, very few people say that, but when they lose when they're not supposed to, everybody's saying that. And I think that's the one thing to keep in mind here is that, yes, Nashville is supposed to win this game, and they went and won that game, and they got a clean sheet. And that is important.
Yeah, I think it's fair to acknowledge quality differences here. Obviously, there's no team in MLS that is as bad as Mocha. And I say bad, that's on relative terms. It's not a slight against Mocha. They're in a different league. But winning a game you're supposed to win and winning in a method that you're not comfortable winning in usually is also a good mark. Like Nashville's supposed to win. Nashville's supposed to have the ball a bunch, which is not usually when Nashville is most successful. And in that circumstance, they had 60% of the ball. They won 3-0. Their two DPs scored goals. Aside from the injuries, which are big, it's a big problem, the injuries. Aside from the injuries, it is about as perfect a first match that you could possibly want. You won in a way you're not comfortable winning. Your new guy, your new playmaker scored a goal, and your two big time playmakers that the entire league is looking at to see whether they're the real deal this year or not, both showed very much to be the real deal. So it's exactly what you wanted out of that game.
Well, and I also think you saw goals in a way that Nashville isn't necessarily used to scoring goals, and that's that interplay between Hani and his striker. Necessarily, like that first goal. I mean, I think it would have beat anybody, even though it was just Mocha. Like that give and go, that interstyle play, running down the middle is not something we've necessarily seen a ton from Nashville. We're kind of used to that. Hey, let's get the ball out wide and cross it in and see what happens. So it was really cool to see that interplay between the attack, how dangerous this attack can be if it's on. I mean, that it could have been 5-6-0 at some points. And I think that's the great thing to see.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. I mean, even without Hani and Surridge, Nashville were still able to should have scored. Honestly, Drew Yearwood missed an all timer there, and then Schaffelberg also missed another one that would have been an incredible goal. But and there were some other, I have no doubt that if Hani stayed on the pitch a little longer, Nashville would have gone maybe one or two more before the half.
I also think it's just good to see Hani, like even for the 25 minutes or 30 minutes that we saw Hani, you just always forget like how just above another league Hani actually is. I mean, I think Tyler Boyd is in comparison as well. I think Tyler Boyd was fantastic against Mocha as well. But man, Hani's quality, like he's just a superstar, and it's great to see.
Well, I was most excited. I mean, Hani had a rough run at the end of the year and needed to get some goals for confidence alone, but Sam Surge absolutely needed to get some goals for confidence. I mean, we talk about it with strikers all the time. And how many times was Sam hitting the post or putting it on target and not scoring down the stretch last season? Like he's a guy that's going to be hugely important to whether this Nashville team is barely a playoff team or something much better. That all lies basically with what Sam Surge is as a player. And to come in, obviously lesser competition, but to come in and get a goal from open play was huge for him. And we know that he's got some level of finishing ability that he hasn't quite shown yet with Nashville. And so, I mean, just very, very excited about that because the the idea of a confident goal scoring Sam Surridge is the entire difference between people being pretty high on this Nashville team and starting looking for heads to roll on this Nashville team.
Yeah, and I think that'll be an absolutely I think the transition will be extremely interesting when Nashville does play Mocha on Wednesday again. It is on Wednesday, correct? Is the match?
At
So
8:30
Nashville,
p.m.,
wow.
9:30 your time, Stephen.
Is it
Yeah,
9:30 my time?
yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, God, that's gross. Anyways, yes, Nashville does play Mocha again. The second leg, I, I I'm I'm kind of expecting a extremely different lineup from what we had on the first couple match days. I'm expecting this to be I don't know, just seeing the competition from Mocha on Wednesday at home. I want to assume, and especially with the injuries involved, I'm sure Gary is looking to put some sort of more backup lineup into the starting rotation, at least for Mocha, because they do have Colorado again on Saturday. It's a long stretch of games, but you never know. Mocha may be coming to Nashville trying to see what they can do.
Well, you want to balance it out. You definitely don't want to go, all academy kids or anything like that, right? You want to balance it out. You want to give the players minutes early on as well. Now, with the five injuries we mentioned earlier, some players are already getting minutes that, naturally they wouldn't like Taylor Washington, for example. But there are some others. Anunga came in against the Red Bulls and played a really, really good 20 minutes. Anunga should by all means start this Mocha match. There are a couple other players who maybe in the forward line who can get their goals that give them that confidence that Clay was talking about. Much easier against Mocha, but that will still give them the confidence, whether it's Gaines or Schaffelberg or even Teal Bunbury. I'm fully expecting Teal Bunbury to start because if Teal Bunbury can get a goal or two versus Mocha, that would be a really good thing to have for that Colorado match because chances are Sam Sturridge is not back by then. So you want these players to get minutes and play, but also I think you understand that the competition is not that hard, and you can maybe integrate maybe a wild Sipich or something like that.
I don't expect to see Sipich. I do expect to see a few different players that we haven't seen yet. But I mean, it's basically preseason. We're only like a week out of preseason at this point. And so I think we're going to see some starters play because they're still getting into shape. They're still getting into season form. And honestly, they need minutes to get into form because there's a championship to play for that's going to be decided here in these next few months. And Nashville has as good a shot as any to win it because they're in it.
Yeah.
Uh, and that shouldn't be taken lightly. I mean, Montreal 10 years ago made a run to the final as one of the worst teams in MLS. All you have to do is get the ball to bounce your way a couple times, and suddenly you're off to the races. And so Nashville should be treating this seriously, and they should be looking at guys to get minutes, even though the result is kind of settled. I do expect to see a number of starters still play.
Yeah, and I do think it's also like Clay said, it is still early in the season. You are trying to get people more minutes. I do think like having this kind of as a preseason, especially because you then go to Colorado on Saturday, which Colorado did have a change in roster. They did lose pretty bad to Portland 4-1 over the weekend. I don't necessarily think Colorado is as bad as that scoreline indicates. I just think that they're going through an adjustment of the team and how it is. So I expect them to be a little bit more dangerous against us on Saturday than they were last week.
Yeah, new manager Chris Armas, known around here in MLS, of course, famous for being an assistant in Manchester United. So take that with whatever you want. But
Famous for being a great MLS player.
yes, of course. I'm talking about his managerial career, but sure, yes, played in MLS as well. Knows this league very well with the Red Bulls and Toronto as well. So he's been around. He's been around for a little bit now. Colorado also made some huge signings. I mean, Zach Steffen coming in, Sam Vines coming in, Georgi Mihalovic coming in. They changed a lot, and just like Steven said, maybe there were some cohesion issues against Portland, but they were also playing at Portland, who Steve and I both know this because we've been there for a match. It's an incredible environment, and it's very hard to play in that atmosphere. So I'm not drawing a whole lot of conclusions, but being at home, best believe they're going to be more motivated. They're going to be ready to kind of put that Portland game behind them. They don't have a midweek game, unlike Nashville, who do have a midweek game. Their season started after Nashville, unlike Nashville, the season started early last week. So there are some things kind of favoring Colorado a little bit, but at the end of the day, they still conceded 4 goals in one half. And Nashville will definitely be looking to take advantage of that again.
And with that, let's just move on to our plugs and predictions. We have to do both matches here. So we'll start with Valeri. You were kind of already going. So why don't you plug and do both matches?
I will say 2-0 at home versus Mocha. Goals from Taylor Washington and Teal Bunbury. I don't know. And I will say the Colorado match will be a 1-0 loss. And Georgi Mihalovic is going to score it. There you go.
You want to plug?
Oh, yes. At Valer Shabelo on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, YouTube. I think that's it. But I don't know. Just follow me at Valer Shabelo. I have so much going on
Clay.
about Nashville SC.
Well, check out Nashville Soccer Archive. Check out Vanderbilt Library, which has the Nashville Soccer's physical archive. Also check out Clay Soul on Facebook and Twitter, and Kicking at 615 when you're done with that. Check that out. I hear they do good work. As for the Mocha match, I think it's going to be 4-1. I think that Nashville comes out firing. I'm going pretty I think Mocha maybe scores the first goal and they get their goal in the competition. It's their this is what they're playing. They're playing to get to this round. Like this is what they're excited about. But I think Nashville pours it on. I think Bunbury scores at least one goal. And then for Colorado, well, the last time Chris Armas was a manager, he lasted 11 matches. Um, I think that he might last more than 11 matches, but he's going to have a tough go of things. Colorado's done a lot of rebuilding. I think that they're excited. I also think that Gary Smith tends to do pretty well against the Colorado Rapids for some mysterious reason. So
Hmm.
that being said, I think that they're going to go to Colorado and they're going to get a win. And we'll say 2-1, 2-1 with a goal from Hani Mukhtar and a goal from Jacob Schaffelberg.
Uh, Also, Clay, I don't know if Valera told you, but speaking of the National Soccer Archive, I do have a physical piece of memorabilia for you, which is the Nashville and Mocha ticket. So I'm excited to have that presented for you, which is a cool piece of history that
He bended it though. He bended it.
It's all right.
speaking of
It's a rare piece of memorabilia, so it doesn't really matter. It's like there was that one of a kind Lord of the Rings card, and the guy sent it off to get graded, and it's like, who does it? It doesn't matter. It could be graded at like half. There's only one of them, so it doesn't really matter what the grade is.
Exactly. There's probably like only four of those tickets that went out. Well, I mean, besides to everybody else at Mocha. Anyways, I'm gonna go 1-0 against Mocha at home. I think it'll be pretty experimental. I'm gonna say a goal for Mackenzie Gaines to score. And then I think Saturday is going to be very interesting. I think it's going to be another 0-0 draw for Nashville. I don't think Sam is going to be in the match. I'm actually curious if Hani Mukhtar will also be in that match for this like lengthy amount of time. And I think it'll be very interesting from a Nashville perspective when it comes to MLS. So 0-0 draw for me. At PH Stephen HD. Thank you so much again for listening to the show. We really appreciate it. We'll be back next week to talk about both of those matches. Yeah, continue listening to the show. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk next week. Have a good rest of your week.